Alright, ladies and gentlemen, and we're just gonna do the one react today. I've been meaning to react to this, picking this over the problem with ground news, more in the sense of the problem with ground news video is over 41 minutes. It's about 41 minutes. That is going to create a very long video, for a lot of people here. Um, as it is, this one is 21 on 17. I also want to give that problem with ground news as much time to get as much traction as it's going to get. Um, so I want to give Lord Intellectual that little bit of space. Um, in this case, we're talking about the language that runs the world. Uh, a React that he did to have is interesting. A lot of what he does is React, so we're going to be reacting to his reaction. Um, Again. But in this case, let's go ahead and get started. Looks like he does have a bit of a setup, so if I may end up jumping around a little bit here, just try to get into a little more of the meat of the situation. Um, just to not have, or unless he is genuinely giving some setup. But as it is, I am already rambling about that much, so let's get into it.
Hello there. Welcome all, and thank you so much for stopping by. Guys, it has been a while, hasn't it? Short break in the content schedule, let's say. Uh, yeah, there's plenty I think that could be said about that. Look, I won't go too much into it today because that will have its own dedicated video at some point. But the long story short is that Google essentially just locked me out of all of my accounts, including the YouTube account, through no fault of my own, I
Yeah,
might add. But I have spoken about that before and in other videos that will be coming up as well. Guys, I really just want to get back into content creation because as a content creator, you do actually need to create content at some point, kind of in the name.
that is true.
You also might be noticing a few differences here. Yes, we have made improvements whilst we have been away. One of which is I am running
Hold
on
on.
an entirely new machine. So I
Ah,
wanted a short video
okay.
today in order to
And
iron out any kinks. We have
there it
just
goes.
migrated away from our old setup. This new setup should be far more capable. Partly why you're seeing me so
Hopefully.
animated, shall we say. And this particular video, half is interesting. I don't believe we have had them on the channel before, at least not this specific channel. I do believe the presenter
Mm,
works in multiple channels. Um,
I
yes,
haven't heard of
but
this
this
channel.
one strikes home for me. So, the ancient, strange coding language that 95% of ATMs use. Well, boy, do I have some information here. So, guys, at a very high level, I have
Okay.
a master's in computer science, and I'm very
I
familiar
didn't
with,
know that.
well, I say very familiar with Cobalt. I cannot write it. I cannot program to save my life. Let's be clear. But there are a lot of interesting things about this language, and I want to see just how many of them he touches on in an 8-minute video. So for those of you who don't know, the language COBOL or COBOL.
Okay, so little bit of backstory here. I more went through a kind of trade school, um, and in that process, I did learn coding, and a lot of it ended up being very self-taught. With me, it was more involving Python, as well as HTML5, which owns JavaScript, HTML, and SSL, if I'm remembering correctly. So I can write or actually write those codes, at least on a rudimentary level, as part of my way of teaching myself those codes was actually writing the codes themselves. But it's very interesting learning that Loda Intellectual has a computer science degree, um, and actually at least understands COBOL. I've never handled it, but you know what? It's going to be interesting to see what he's got to say.
whatever you want to call it. I believe it was developed in either the 60s or the 70s. Now, you are testing my computer science knowledge here, but I believe that's where it's from. And its main claim to fame is that the vast majority of the banking systems and legacy systems use this language. Not so bad in and of itself. The problem is it is an extremely old, very low level language. So it is very difficult to learn. And it was being maintained by a bunch of legacy boomers that have largely retired out of the industry. So all of our banking data runs on this ancient language that no one can speak anymore, essentially. If you are able to learn COBOL, you are in a very secure position because it is a very much in demand skill, which is exactly why I looked at it because, hey, I like to get paid an exorbitant amount of money for a very secure position, let's
Don't
say.
we all?
But the main problem, is that because so many critical systems rely on it, it's difficult to migrate away from because you can't just turn off the banking system whilst you do this migration away from it. And when new programmers come in and they
Mhm.
gain any kind of efficiency, then that efficiency is immediately taken up by extra capacity. The banks always want to
Mhm.
process more transactions faster. Don't forget, there was that, I can't remember if it was a broken house or someone ran a cable essentially from one side of the United States to the other, or at the very least across the Rocky Mountains, I believe, so that they could shave a
I
few
don't remember this,
milliseconds
honestly.
off of their purchase and selling transactions. I'm not going to go too much into that because I'm vaguely remembering that story from one of my professors back in the day, but I do know that it's real. I did look it up at some point, and hey, maybe some of you in the comments will know exactly what I am referring to there. We've also
Yeah, that's honestly something that I haven't been made familiar with that story. But no, absolutely 100%. Is with the example of banks not wanting to switch away from COBOL. All uh, being as that's what everything is built on different language models, uh, like what has been learned about different AI models, is that each one kind of specializes in certain things, or maybe used for in specific ways that others can't or aren't as good for. Um, for example, like HTML5, the bulk of what you see on the internet, that is HTML5. Five. Um, Again, that's the fifth iteration of HTML. HTML has been around for a while. HTML5 is just the fifth iteration of it. And that is, and it incorporate and it's JavaScript and SSL rather than those being separate things. So it's written a little bit differently than each of those three on their own. But again, that's basically what the internet is written off of. With once a particular language model becomes the predominant coding language for whatever system, um, that is what it is, are almost guaranteed stuck at. Period. And unless a company or companies are willing to have the downtime of having a completely new system built from scratch, and then take the time to take the old system offline while they migrate or while they switch over to the new system and hope it doesn't break everything, which it can, and it absolutely 100% can break everything, and in like business ending ways. That's not an option. And even then, that can be a very big gamble for a lot of companies. And for this being something that basically every bank in existence on the planet uses, that's not something that they can just do. they would, or the amount of catastrophic damage that are just trying to switch away from this could do is insane. And the new system would have to be so specifically built, by my understanding. And again, if I'm wrong, absolutely 100% roast me in the comments. And please bring your receipt, and if you do. But it has the potential of doing incredibly catastrophic damage globally. And so it's just not the risk to reward or the ratio does not make sense.
Moved to using some of the old microwave overland transmission towers as well that were decommissioned many years ago, and then now they're being brought up and recommissioned because, again, that's
Mm-hmm.
quicker than satellite, funnily enough. And when you are dealing with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of trade and sell trade and sell orders over the course of a day, a week, what have you, having just a few milliseconds ahead of your competitors does make a difference. So yes, it does make total sense to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to run a fiber optic cable across the Rocky Mountains, or to reinstate these old microwave transmission towers. You can trust me on that. So with COBOL being so old, being so critical, and having no one speak it anymore, it's one of these. It's famous in the computer science world, let's say. And any other computer science majors here, leave a comment below and let me know what you think, just so the audience knows that I'm not making it up on the fly. But regardless, I should focus on the content. It's half as interesting. Very good channel. Definitely enjoy their content. They have a much more generalist subject matter, but they are usually very science based, and they do have a lot of interesting topics and interesting, shall we say, discussions that go on. So if you do like this video, definitely go give them a subscribe, or at least give some of their other content a watch, so that you can determine whether it's something that you want to continue with. But without further ado, let's get started.
Identification Division, Program ID, HAI 557, Procedure Division, Display. Sorry, are you not following? If not, don't blame yourself, because that wasn't in English. I was speaking COBOL, a computer language that almost nobody knows anymore, but also underpins over 40% of online banking systems, 80% of in-person credit card transactions,
That also used to be much more.
and 95%
Okay.
of AT.
Okay, so it is interesting that that it does seem that, due to the fact that, again, it is a dying language. It is a language that almost the people who knew how to read it and how to write it, they're almost all out of the industry, if not entirely out of the industry. And so the people to fill those roles just don't exist anymore. Uh, so at that point, how do you keep up or maintain a system that nobody can work on? Well, you're kind of forced to migrate to something else. So it is interesting to see that so much of the banking industry has at least started migrating over, um, with these other particular hardware stuff, like the pin pad ads at the cash registers, as well as ATMs. It's a little understandable, because at that point, those all have software and firmware that are specifically made to those particular units. And at that point, it becomes an issue of you're changing coding language, and that may not be compatible with that software and firmware, and may start making some rather crucial mistakes. It's because just because one coding language and is able to communicate effectively in a particular way, does not mean other coding languages are going to be able to communicate with the same other variables, all as it locked in, the same way that our original coding language is going to be. And so there may be specific instances where you go to a different coding language, suddenly other software has to change. Maybe even the hardware, or you're having to make all that change all at the same time, and not all of that may be able to be done over the air.
Transactions to this day. By one estimate, COBOL programs handle $3 trillion worth of transactions a day. According to the MIT Technology Review, the oldest verified, currently running computer program in the world is in COBOL, managing defense contracts for the United States Department of Defense.
Ooh.
Oh, I need to be very careful what I say here. But look, very high level. One of my
You need to be? Hey, what intellectual. I've got 3 bases within an hour drive from me. And, right here in the US. All in the same city. I hate to say it, on this one, I might have you a little beaten. Gotta be a little careful what I say.
previous employers was a specialist in repairing the systems that, as in this,
I misquoted what I
was
said.
a specialist in repairing the systems.
Oh, no, not what I wanted.
Managing defense contracts for the United States Department of Defense.
Oh, I need to be very careful what I say here. But look, very high level. One of my previous employers was a specialist in repairing the systems that, as in the actual hardware systems that run these. And so there was a saying: when you go in the workshop, even if something looks incredibly old, don't throw it out because that could be a $2 trillion computer.
Yeah. He's not joking. Someone from long line of military family, who does talk to old vets, does talk to people who've had classified information that has been declassified, so that way they can then talk about it. Yes. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And there, this is the biggest argument uh, in the U.S., and I'm not meaning to get into politics on this. It's the argument, from my understanding, is about the federal government spending way too much on the Department of Defense, or now Department of War, however you want to call it. Part of the argument that I've heard from the military side of things is, wait a minute, we're spending how much on a coffee maker? We're spending how much on standard bolts and hardware and stuff like that? Why on earth does this cost so much just for the part? And why are we making it so that way people who have boots on the ground can't fix the stuff that breaks when it's on the ground? And again, as I'm not gonna try to get into politics, but yeah, it's other examples of, he's not joking when you look at, like, hey, this is old stuff. Don't throw it away. That is worth more than what most families will make.
a lot of this hardware is genuinely left over from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and so on. So you go in and you see this absolutely ancient magnetic tape IBM that is in the process of being restored. And you think, oh, this must have been here because it's all dusty and worn down. You think, okay, this must have been here for like 30 years. No one's going to miss this. No, no, you don't touch that because that could be quite literally irreplaceable. So I don't know. It's just so interesting how vulnerable the system is, and people don't realize. People don't realize that. But anyway, I'm rambling. Let's continue.
or the Trump Kennedy Center for the War Arts, or whatever we have to call it these days. If you've applied for federal student loans or filed for unemployment during COVID in one of at least 12 US states, that most likely got run through many of the 220 to 800 billion lines of COBOL code still in use these days. And if the system kept running into problems while you tried to use it, it may have been because there weren't enough COBOL engineers on hand to help the system handle a huge influx in applications. Yet, despite being so widely used, this once populous coding language is now a skill so special that Indeed is running ads making fun of how hard it is to find a COBOL engineer. If coding languages were mythical creatures, COBOL would be a vampire. It's somehow both immortal and dead, and tends to suck the life out of people who get too close to it.
That is
so
an excellent
how did we
analogy.
get here? Why do we still rely on it? And if I drive a wooden stake through a mainframe at the Department of Defense, will it die? Today, I will try to answer.
I just want to jump in here and say I'm going to assume he's going to say it is a very low level language. Now, what does low level mean? So you at the lowest level you have the actual hardware. You have the physical layer, which is essentially the transistors capturing and releasing electrons. So if you think of a computer, think of a person standing next to a lamp, and they have a switch that they turn on and off. When the lamp is on, that is a 1. When they have it off, that is a 0. And that is binary. That is the basis of all of our computer systems currently. Now, one lamp ain't going to do much, but imagine 4 people standing in a grid. And think of the patterns you could do with just those 4 people turning the lamp on and off in different sequences. Now expand that further. Imagine, say, 4,000 people standing in a grid and turning on and off in not random patterns, but in sequence, or not in sequence, but coordinated. You would be able to see patterns emerge. You would be able to see and then you can run calculations and do all of this type of thing. Sorry, guys, I haven't recorded in over a month. Can you tell?
Yeah, no. I get at what he's getting at. I love the way he's describing it, or the way that he's pointing out that when you're talking about low level, like this is, we're talking about like it's speaking directly to the hardware. It doesn't care. It's talking directly to the hardware. Like it's talking directly to the CPU. It's talking directly to the RAM. It doesn't care. Or about whatever else it may think it may be between it and the hardware. No, it's talking directly to it. And it can get that low level. Some of the cyber attacks that we have experienced in the last several years may have been kernel level. The kernel level happens after a certain point. And that is still a rather low level, but it is not that low level. There are different stages of how low or high level something can be. Kernel, like the Windows operating system, for example, most widely used operating system on the planet, is again the operating system, the OS, as that is built on what is called a kernel, which is part of the basis of the operating system. It is actually contained in that little file that there's a joke about, System32. Oh, yeah, don't delete that. Why? That's where everything that makes up the operating system, including the kernel, live. And if you get rid of that, congratulations, you lost everything.
I did do some stuff for X, but yeah, we'll get back to that. Regardless, binary being the lowest level is called machine code. That is what controls the actual transistors. Now, when you have a low-level language, you're getting very, very close to the machine code. Think of things like no, not C++. That would even be a higher language as well. Think of assembly. Assembly is another very low level.
Yeah, no, that's where I was like, I love how you brought up C++, because probably I would believe that in the broader world, C++, C Sharp are these languages that, at, these are what you learn to build to make games. Yeah, those are fairly high level. They're talking to drivers, are in the operating system to then run everything. And again, those are fairly high level. Uh, this is talking very, very low level where it's maybe, and what you read as the coding language gets translated into binary, which then gets talked to or communicated to the hardware. Or again, a lot of these things, various different ones will operate at different levels of the of the system, be it in the operating system, being very high level or rather high level. Does it go down onto kernel level like your anti cheats or your kernel level anti cheats where no, they're ignoring the operating system and going and lower than that? And is it talking and it even and starting to jump in before the kernel even takes place? As there are different, that's kind of examples of how low level are we trying to get. And this is one of the lower level, all kind of coding and languages that again nobody uses anymore or nobody knows it anymore. Or the fact that even like LinkedIn is joking about, hey, these things are the people who don't understand this anymore. Congratulations, you're a unicorn.
Language. So the closer you get to the hardware, the more control you have because you are orchestrating the actual physical hardware in any way that you want.
Nope.
Now
I
you
am
have to
entirely
do
blocking him.
things like reserve memory, and it gets very, very, very difficult compared to something like Python, which
Yep. I want to apologize to him. I've been blocking him out the entire time. I just realized that. And, and I really want to apologize about that. I am so sorry. But I only do one takes. It is my policy. And I do one take. I don't repeat. So otherwise, everything I've already done completely out the window. Oh, this is no longer a clean react. It would then no longer be a clean react. I hope my gist has been given.
is a very high level language. Python will
Mm-hmm.
basically handle
Yeah.
a lot of the nitty gritty for you. So you can just type print hello world
Mm-hmm.
and it will handle how that's displayed on the screen and how memory gets allocated, a whole bunch of stuff like that. But it means you have far less control. Now, you can still get a lot of control if you know what you're doing in Python, but if you really want to get down into the specifics of the hardware, you need to go low level, and not all languages will support that. So COBOL is going to be one of these very low level languages that gives you an extraordinary amount of control over the hardware, and you can get it to sing and dance and do whatever you want it to do. But it is extremely difficult. One wrong bit, not even so much like
Mm-hmm.
a misspelt word, a single wrong bit can throw off the entire program. That is that. So your face is against the grindstone when you're using low-level languages like this, and I do wonder if that's what he's going to bring up. Don't forget, the old way we used to do it, the old punch cards and the old magnetic reels, that was essentially typing in machine code. Those punch cards were machine code for the most part, and when you put them into the machine, it basically encoded that into the magnetic reel, and that played back that series of instructions. There were also the, was it Apollo, the early NASA missions. They actually had programming weaves. They were wires with magnets weaved into them, and that was a hard-coded program. Each magnet was a 1 or a 0, and I'm going to go off on a very long tangent here, so I'm going to stop myself. But the world of computer science is absolutely fascinating, and I hope you agree. And if you do want to hear more about that in a more, shall we say, coordinated way, let me know, because that is a video that I would be very happy to make.
Answer 2 of those questions. COBOL, or the Common Business-Oriented Language, dates back to the late 50s when this whole computer thing was really starting to catch on.
There you go.
Back then, most programming was done in languages made by a particular mainframes manufacturer to be used on their mainframes. So unlike now, when you can jot down a few lines in Java and run your code on whatever computer you wish, programs in the late 50s were basically bespoke to the machines they were.
Yeah, and when they talk about, oh, computers back in the day used to make up entire rooms. No, they meant it took up entire rooms. This, what they're showing, is only part of it. It's not the full thing. It's part of it. And where they may have these little, like punch cards that are almost like I am spacing on the name of it, and but those big flashcards are almost like that, but they had specific like dimpling on them that you had to punch in exactly the right order. And if you didn't and do it in the right order, congratulations, you're starting all over.
Made for, which is fine unless, say, you want to update or change your hardware or write a program that involves multiple machines. In 1959, people across the computer industry decided they'd like to have one language that they could use on whatever hardware or operating system they pleased. And
what that particular concept is what is known as standardization. And to have certain examples, USB is a standardized protocol. It is also a series of standardized connectors. As USB standing for Universal Serial Bus. Some other ones, for example, is PCIe. The connectors you would look in your computer and there's connectors on the motherboard that you put your graphics card into. That is a standardized series of connectors. Whereas the longer ones able to connect more pins and that allowing more channels as PCIe lanes. I'm getting off into a tangent myself. But those are some of the examples. Like FireWire is an old standard that we don't have anymore because USB just got better than it. And so yeah, when a bunch of different entities are wanting to come together and be like, hey, we're sick of trying to figure out what everybody else is using because our systems that need to talk to each other can't. And yeah, we need to create a standardized we need to figure out what we are all going to use. That is creating a standard, or an industry standard, or standardizing a certain thing.
The United States Department of Defense was like, that's a good idea, we want in on that. And a year later, we had COBOL. It didn't take long to catch on, in part because the DoD mandated that any machine they bought had a COBOL compiler, meaning that if you didn't give it the program, literally, you were missing out on federal defense contracts. And this was the Cold War. The DoD was funding whatever. Needles in space, bombs to kill us all, COBOL, you name it. So naturally, everyone made the machines COBOL compatible so they could stay on the DoD gravy train, which I assume was literal and well-funded. And pretty soon, COBOL was all over the government, the financial sector, and basically anywhere else you'd find yourself churning through tons of data. So it's not that weird that COBOL was made, and not even that weird that it became important. What's weird is that it's still around. After all, COBOL came out in the same decade as cassette tapes, non-rotary phones, and ARPANET, all of which have been very updated. And in some ways, COBOL has too. In academia and the development of new computery things, modern languages have nearly totally replaced COBOL. The trouble is, the systems written in it in the first place persist. How Paleolithic is COBOL? Well, when I asked engineers whether they knew anything about it for the sake of this video, most responses boiled down to no! And I'm offended that you think I would. How old do I look? And then suddenly ordering $100 worth of anti-aging creams online and not answering my questions. So for what it's worth, one guy did respond and mentioned that he took one COBOL class decades ago and is still, to this day, contacted for COBOL-related jobs. Such is the shortage. To someone familiar with modern coding languages, COBOL looks nuts. Think of the difference between writing in COBOL versus something like Java or Python as the difference between making something out of clay versus Lego. Both can certainly be done, but clay, the modern language in this metaphor, will be more efficient, and you can make the exact shape you want because the thing itself is so adaptable to your needs. Maybe you make a statue, or a cereal bowl. Whatever you want, it can make the shape. And you can make the same stuff with Lego, but it'll involve more painstaking assembly and will end up looking blocky because you're building with pieces that are more rigidly defined than a bit of clay would be. Point being, COBOL applications run just fine, but when you look at the code, it looks completely different, and many would say clunkier and less efficient, than an equivalent program in, say, Python. Perhaps my favorite COBOL quirk is how important it was to its creators that it read like plain English. A line of COBOL code is called a sentence and has to end with a period. While Java has 68 keywords, ones with a built-in meaning like if, else, or return, COBOL has literally hundreds. Anyone can see the difference. In Java, the Hello World program looks like this, which, if you know Java, is super straightforward, but if you don't...
Yeah, and again, and one of the first things that basically any program in any and most any language will learn is how to make it spit out Hello World. That is, my understanding, is synonymous amongst all coding languages. But yeah, no, this is example of like Java. Where was it that he was showing COBOL? If I can find it. I already went way too far back. Something tells me I did not. No, there. Yeah, like this. That looks incredibly different. Just because it's got a bunch of words there. And it's like, yeah, no. It looks weird. It doesn't look. Or just because you have this one little section, which doesn't look horrendous, it is a completely different beast. Okay, so it just because oh yeah, no, I know how to write code, does not mean you can jump from one coding language to another. Or it does not work like that.
Public static void main. This is the same thing in COBOL, and you can probably guess what each sentence here is doing. This is the title page, the program is called Hello World, this is where the magic happens, this is telling the computer to display, this is what it's going to display, and then we stop. Remember, this language was designed for business and government type folks. They wanted it understandable in a way most computer stuff at the time was not, so they really buried the math. In early COBOL, you'd
Bit of irony there, given how difficult it is as a language.
do a sum by typing.
Yeah, the other bit of irony is the fact, or one of the things that I found funny, like, yeah, he glossed over quite a bit, is that there is what's called a syntax of how a particular bit of coding language is structured. Alright, between, like, there is a body, or almost like how you write a letter. There's a header, there's a body, and kind of like that. And it's kind of structured in a kind of similar way. And but the particular way it's structured and the particular way it is as done can vary wildly by what coding language it is, as but it can also vary quite a bit by what the program is trying to accomplish.
That's what each sentence here is doing. This is the title page. The program is called Hello World. This is where the magic happens. This is telling the computer to display. This is what it's going to display, and then we stop. Remember, this language was designed for business and government type folks. They wanted it understandable in a way most computer stuff at the time was not, so they really buried the math. In early COBOL, you'd
Bit of irony there, given how difficult it is as a language.
do a sum by typing add 5 to 6. Eventually, they added math symbols so you could just say compute 5 plus 6, but still, that's legible English. And this is relevant outside of straight up math. In Java, I could change a variable called name to Sam. I can do it with this mathy notation. In COBOL, I'd write the sentence move Sam to name, like moving my name into the box labeled name. How intuitive. The trouble is, while COBOL is intuitive on a sentence level, once you have millions of lines of this stuff, it's nigh impossible to parse unless you built the system yourself. Because every variable is global, it's really easy to change one little line here and break the entire thing.
Yeah, again, there is a reason why a lot of coders have turned in, or why the art of writing your own code entirely from scratch basically gone away. A lot of it is turned down into just copy and paste. As so, the issue with that is a lot of, or some of the people that get into it and go like, oh yeah, I can code, I can code. Can you write your own code from scratch? So yeah, it's an entirely different beast. And it's just someone who has genuinely tried doing things completely from scratch. It is not the same. It is wildly far from the same.
Because there's a statement called go-to that has the program jump to a completely separate and sometimes hard to find part of the code, it's easy to get lost trying to read what the thing is doing. Often, programs written in COBOL are derided as being spaghetti code, aka impossible to untangle and, if I may add to the metaphor, easily lost in the sauce. Over the years, efforts were made to modernize COBOL and give it some more of-the-moment features that make it a more versatile or efficient tool. Trouble is, most of the relevant COBOL programs you can use today were written before they did that, so it didn't help. But for all its clunk, COBOL is genuinely good at processing large amounts of data without screwing it up, which is especially important in, banking and the government. So no, most new things aren't written in COBOL, why should they be? But the old things chug along. But with precious few people learning it anymore, there are fewer and fewer people alive, let alone alive and not retired in Boca, who can maintain these systems. In fact, a lot of COBOL maintenance
Exactly what I was saying before.
is handled by a cabal of 600 cool old dudes who call themselves the COBOL Cowboys and get called for COBOL emergencies, which works, respectfully, for now. But what about the future?
For as long as they're alive is the unsaid implication there.
Sure. Well, we either need to start teaching COBOL to people who don't remember 9/11, or start the extremely expensive, laborious process of rewriting these programs before we find ourselves with no idea how the ATM works. Well, I say we, but I won't be doing any of that. Instead, I'll be watching Day Pass, a new show by Jason from Not Just Bikes where he explores cities via their public transportation networks. And I'll be watching it on this video's sponsor, Nebula. Nebula is a creator-owned and operated streaming service that's home.
Okay, he's going to do the ad read now, so
Yeah.
we'll back out of that. But I will say I am actually subscribed to Nebula, so it is actually a really great system, really great. What's the word I'm looking for? Platform. That's the word I'm looking for. So, especially because you get a lot of uncensored things on there. YouTube and the compression algorithm on YouTube is just absolutely. Either way, he's going to do his ad read there. And guys, if you did enjoy that, definitely go give half as interesting a watch. I am surprised he didn't talk about how COBOL is low level. I mean, yeah, okay, it's a little bit clunky because it's from the 50s, but at the same time, his whole analogy of clay versus Lego, I wouldn't 100% agree with that, because again, it is comparing COBOL to Python. Python is easier to use and easier to learn, and you can still do amazing things with it.
Yeah, no, Python is not hard to learn. I think with having to be generating myself, the ability to teach other people, uh, or at least creating training materials for both Python and HTML5. I think I learned both of them learned and then both in a month. So they're not hard to learn, and especially not at an introductory level. Uh, uh, but again, these very high level, all kind of programs, they genuinely aren't hard, or they aren't hard to learn. Once you start going down and on a level all further and further and further, that's where it starts getting harder to learn. Because again, that's where that spaghetti code. Oh, and it's also why a bunch of companies have old servers with people who seem to sit around all day and do nothing, but their entire job is make sure that server doesn't go down. Why? They're the ones who built it, and literally no one else there knows what it does, and would never be able to replace them.
But you're not close to the hardware in Python, or what's called bare metal. But I'd just begin reiterating earlier points there. So I'd probably catch him up a little bit on that. But otherwise, very good video, and I think that was very, very illuminating of him to make, because most people outside of the community, the computer science community, have no idea about COBOL and have no idea how the banking system is held up on these struts, essentially, that are groaning under the weight. And hey, if you want a career that is extremely secure and very, very well paid, go be a COBOL programmer. But just be aware of what you're getting yourself into. Lord Intellectual will not be going within 100 feet of COBOL ever.
Do not recommend.
I had a tiny bit of exposure to the language itself, and I ran screaming. And this is someone who got taught SQL, right? So, don't get me started on query languages. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being with me. I need to get back into the flow of things. I feel like I'm a bit hesitant this video, but whole new setup. Hopefully, all of the sound comes out well. And yeah, I'm just glad to be back. I will give a quick, massive shout out to everyone who assisted, because I was only able to get my accounts back due to a community swell beneath my feet. It was absolutely amazing. But again, I won't touch on that too much here, because there will be a dedicated video on that. With that, guys, I am glad to be back. Thank you so much for bearing with me during this time. You're going to see some changes, because I've just finally got some more powerful hardware, can do more things with it. So the intro will change, the outro will change, a whole bunch of other things.
Okay, so and it's more him going off on a tangent, and less about his reaction. And we are already so off, way longer than I anticipated this thing, and I really should have seen that coming. And because get into topics that I really like, I can really care about, and I start getting real talkative. So, oh, absolutely 100%. And I actually really enjoyed that, and got out some information I didn't know. Go ahead and give Lord Intellectual a follow. I'll give him a like. I will make sure. There it is. I will make sure to go ahead and leave a link to the original video that he reacted to, as well as Lord Intellectual video. So that way, if you would, go ahead, give them both a watch. But again, absolutely 100% do recommend giving Lord Intellectual a follow. Otherwise, you'll have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day.